Commodore, my 64, my Commodore 64.
Hi there, and welcome to a Let's Type episode from the Commodore 64 Appreciation Society. This is a series where I reach back into the past and type out a program from an old computer magazine, and then when I finish typing it in, I play it. Today we're going back to November 1983, a time when millions of kids were freaked out after watching The Day After, pole position was eating everyone's quarters, and rock stars were using hotel windows as makeshift gravity testing labs. But we'll get to that later. Meanwhile, the folks at Compute magazine were cranking out content for all the major home computers of the day. Early machines like the TRS-80, the Atari 8-bits, and the Commodore VIC-20 still dominated the scene, and the type-ins reflected that. But the landscape was shifting. The 64 had been on shelves for over a year and was finally gaining momentum, but its total dominance was still a year or two away. That meant the magazine games from this era were generally more modest, built for hardware with fewer bells and whistles than the 64. Today's game is no different. It's called Crazy Climber, and it's one that I vividly remember typing into my VIC-20 back in the day. It's a fun one, and the Commodore 64 port is especially unhinged. We're talking full Rockstar level chaos here. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, if you enjoy these type-in videos, make sure to subscribe and check out the playlist. We've had a blast working through these old magazine programs, and the comments from all of you have been incredible. It's great to see so much passion for the 64 still going strong after all these years. Alright, enough with the chit chat, let's get typing. Crazy Climber was written by Ted Reynolds and ported to the Commodore 64 for this issue. There was also a version published for the TI-99. It was clearly inspired by the 1980 game of the same name, developed by Nichibutsu. That arcade game was unique, strange, and a smash hit in Japan. In fact, the only arcade titles more popular that year were Galaxian and Pac-Man. The premise was very simple: climb a series of skyscrapers. Its smooth graphics and voice synthesis made it stand out, but what most people remember is the control scheme. You needed 2 joysticks to move your climber. My local Chuck E. Cheese had a cabinet, and even though I was terrible at it, it was one of my favorites. Back then, home versions of arcade games were basically the holy grail of gaming. We all wanted to play our favorite arcade titles without feeding machines an endless stream of quarters. So, a type-in program that promised a similar experience, that was a big deal. As a kid, this was all incredibly exciting. I still remember finding the issue at the library, immediately checking it out, and rushing home to start typing. I actually remember typing in the VIC-20 version of this one quite well. Our computer was set up in the family room, plugged into the color TV, and I'm pretty sure I drove my sister up the wall by monopolizing it after school, right during her Three's Company time. Today we've got more screens than we know what to do with, but in the early 80s, the 1 TV per household rule was very much a thing. Crazy Climber was a fairly short type-in, but I still managed to break it on my first try. The little climber appeared split in 2 when I ran it. Eventually I got it working though, and that felt fantastic. One more game added to the collection. And honestly, it looked pretty good. It was obviously simpler than the arcade version, but it was fun and absolutely worth the hour or so it took to type in. The TI-99 version also looked pretty nice, and I love the quick silhouette of a monster in the window right before he tries to drop something on the climber's head. The 64 version of Crazy Climber is pretty short, just about 2 pages of code. It's written primarily in BASIC, but it includes a few machine language routines to keep things running fast. Of course, that usually means typing in long stretches of data statements, but that's fine. I'll just take those parts nice and slow. While I'm doing that, let's flip through some of the game ads in the issue. As a kid, nothing was more exciting than getting a new Compute magazine, and the very first thing I'd do was skim through it to see the latest games. That was how we discovered new titles back then, and I would absolutely just stare at those ads. Looking back, Compute had a real split personality. Most of the magazine focused on serious computing, adult-oriented articles about how computers were changing work, education, and society. But kids like us were a huge part of their audience too, drawn in by the type-ins, and many of the ads definitely catered to us. And as always, the November '83 issue was packed with game ads. No doubt the publishers were hoping to stir up some excitement heading into the Christmas season. Spelunker was always one of my favorite games. Originally developed for Atari computers, it was ported to the 64 in 1984 by Broderbund. It's a cave exploring platformer and it's just a ton of fun to play. A lot of ads back then bundled multiple titles together, and here we've got Spare Change and Lode Runner. I didn't play much of Spare Change, but Lode Runner was another one of my favorites, and a bona fide classic. This 1983 release from Broderbund was a landmark platformer and an absolute must-play. You couldn't open a computer magazine in 1983 without seeing Miner 2049er. Created by Bill Hogue, it was one of the first breakout hits of the home computer era and eventually made its way to more than 20 platforms. This particular ad is interesting because it also features Scraper Caper, which was intended to be a sequel. Ultimately, the developers weren't happy with how it was shaping up and the project was scrapped. Here we go. One of the most iconic ads of the era, Temple of Apshai. I still remember those glowing eyes staring out from the darkness, and that tiny screenshot was more than enough to make me desperately want the game. When I finally got my Commodore 64 in 1985, this was one of the very first titles I absolutely had to own. Finally, here's an ad for Dragonhawk. I don't remember playing this one at all, but I probably should have. It reviewed well and it looks like a fun Joust clone. But the real reason I'm including it here is the absolutely bonkers way the guy in the ad is holding his joystick. This is peak 1980s advertising energy right here. I've been making great progress typing in Crazy Climber. The last page has been a bit of a slog with all those data statements, but it's actually gone quickly and I feel like I've been pretty accurate. There were also a couple chunks of code dedicated to sound and another section for sprite movement and collision detection, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing and hearing how the game turns out. This final batch of data statements is for the machine language routines, which are likely handling the animation and movement of the character. Alright, done. We'll just save it. And it's 24 blocks on disk, or 6K. That makes it almost twice as large as what the original VIC version would have been. And now, the moment of truth. Oops, the text at the top of the screen is messed up. That's an easy fix though, and I'll get to it the next time I'm in the code. And come on, 4 minutes? That's quite the wait. Oh, and we got to 2:15 on the timer before we found an error. It's a syntax error in line 1210, which turns out to be because I used periods instead of commas in the data statement. Well, that's also an easy fix. And we'll take care of that other problem while we're in the code. There we go. That should be 3 instead of 13. And here we go again. Man, this wait is crazy. I think we should add in a little background music to pass the time. Well, at least the counter got to 219 this time. Let's see what the error is. Oh, okay. I entered a square bracket rather than a colon. I seem to do that a fair bit. Okay, fixed. Now we'll save that version and try this again. Huh. Well, on one hand, I'd say this is great progress. On the other hand, it's obviously really messed up. Oh, And look, there's an error there at the top. Black text on the black background. I didn't notice that at first. Let's check it out. Okay, it's a syntax error in 500. Where's the problem? Oh, I see it. The brackets are goofed up. That should fix it. Okay. Let's save again and go through the countdown again. Oh, okay. That's much better. Our crazy climber is looking good and I'm able to move him around without a problem. But the stuff falling down doesn't look right. I think that should be a TV. And I don't know what that's supposed to be. So something is screwed up with how the sprites are assembled. Still, I think the gameplay is working just fine. Hopefully the sprites are an easy problem to fix. So I reviewed the code and found a pretty major problem. I completely messed up a data statement in the section for the sprites. There were a couple of other minor issues as well, but that was the most egregious and likely explains the problems that we were seeing. Hopefully we have a working game now. Alright, here we go. Our climber is making his way up the building, dodging an absolutely crazy assortment of objects raining down from above. The VIC-20 and arcade versions had things like flower pots. Still not recommended to toss out of your apartment window, but at least somewhat believable. This version, completely off the rails. So far I've seen TVs, safes, barbells, and grand pianos. Grand pianos! Who's living up there? Keith Moon?
Let me help you with that, Keith. Right out the window. You take the final toss, buddy. Sorry about that. You feeling a little better now, Keith?
Well, yeah, I've been sluggish and depressed lately, but that seems to have done the trick.
Well, that's great. I'm sure you'll be good. What an amazing guy, ladies and gentlemen.
The sidewalk around this place must look like a war zone. There's no score display in the game, so you're left doing a bit of guesswork to figure out how well you're doing, but there are a couple of clues. For starters, the longer you survive, the higher up the building your climber appears, which is a clever way of making things harder because dodging all this madness becomes trickier as you go. And according to the instructions, the frequency of falling objects doubles once you hit 150. I must have crossed that threshold because things are coming down fast and furious now. Oh, I just got whacked with a barbell, and there I go. Well, there we go. This is my 5th or 6th game now, and 281 is my best score so far. I love games that force you to continually improve just to beat your high score, and this one definitely does that. I've got to say, this is a pretty fun game. Is it as good as the arcade version of Crazy Climber? Absolutely not. But it's a fun rendition and it gets genuinely challenging. It's also noticeably faster than the VIC-20 version I remember playing all those years ago. A big congratulations to Ted Reynolds for creating such a great game and getting it published back in the day, and hats off to Compute for the port and making it available in the first place. This is exactly why typing in games was so much fun. Oh, and a special thanks to Keith Moon and all the other rock stars who paved the way for tossing ridiculous items out of hotel windows. Without them, who knows? We might never have had games like this at all. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. And if you have any experiences with Crazy Climber or typing in your own programs, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. Hope to see you again.